குயர் சென்னை கிரானிக்கல்ஸோட குயர் இலக்கிய விழா 2018 அடுத்த நிகழ்வு சிங்கி ஹோமோ ப்ராஜெக்ட். ஸோ இந்த சிங்கி ஹோமோ ப்ராஜெக்ட் வந்து புதுடெல்லியில் வசிக்கிற 2 வடகிழக்கு இந்திய ஓர்பாலிற்கு கொண்ட ஆண்களால் துவங்கப்பட்ட இணைய ஊடக முயற்சி. ஸோ வடகிழக்கு இந்திய பகுதிகளை சேர்ந்த பால் புதுமையினர் கதைகளை, உடலின் மனதில் பதிந்திருக்கும் அனுபவங்களை இணைய அச்சு ஊடகங்களில் பதிவு செய்யும் முயற்சியில் இவங்க ஈடுபட்டிருக்காங்க. ஸோ நம்ம தமிழ்நாட்டை தாண்டி வேற இடங்கள் இருக்கிறவங்களுக்கு முக்கியத்துவம் கொடுக்கும்போது பெரிய அளவில் குரல்கள் வந்து வெளிவராத வடகிழக்கு இந்திய மாதிரியான பகுதிகளிலேருந்து குரல்களை கொண்டு வரணுன்றதுக்காக இவங்களை நாம் இன்வைட் பண்ணியிருக்கோம். இதில் பவல் சகோல்சம் வந்து முதல்ல வாசிப்பார். அதுக்கப்புறம் குமம் டேவின்சன் அவரால் வர முடியலை. ஸோ அவரோட வீடியோ ஒன்று ப்ளே பண்ணுவோம். பவல் சகோல்சம் வந்து இம்பாலில் இருந்து பிறந்தவர். இவர் தற்போது நஸ்ரியாவில் பணியாற்றிட்டு இருக்காரு. நஸ்ரியா வந்து லெஸ்பியன் இருபால் இருப்பினர் திருநர் இவங்களை பற்றின இதில் கவனம் செலுத்துகிற ஒரு பெண்ணிய அமைப்பு. பவல் வந்து புதுடெல்லியில் பெண்ணுரிமைகள் மற்றும் ஆண்களை பாலின சமத்துவத்தில் பங்கேற்க வைக்கும் வளர்ச்சி பயிற்றுனராக செயல்படுகிறார். நன்றி.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you Queer Chennai Chronicle and the Queer LitFest to have us here, and also to Nandini and Maitri for being such a fabulous translator for us. And the session so far has been really good. Thank you. It was very enriching to hear all those that everyone shared in the previous session. To say a little bit about Chinky Homo Project, it was started by me and a friend somewhere around February this year. It basically something that both of us realized about how the lack of literature on being queer and from Northeast, we felt that the lack of that had also impacted our lives in a lot of ways. Like when we came out from Manipur for studies and later on for other self-determination like jobs and being part of the LGBTIQ movement, we got a lot of resources to go through about people from various parts of the country and also of the world, but not having some voice from home, we felt there was some lack in it in becoming whole itself. As of now, it's a niche initiative. There is, at the moment, both of us are the one who are actively working on it. Recently, there was a emerging queer leaders summit that had for Northeast India that happened in Imphal, and there we met a lot of really young and enthusiastic and very fierce young queer people from Meghalaya, from Nagaland, from Shillong, from Dimapur, and also from Assam and Mizoram as well. And we are in touch with them, and we're trying to come up with more content that way, so that it's not just us Meitei, Manipuri, gay men talking about it, but we can bring in more representation, because that is basically what we want to do. The name itself, the Chinky Homo Project, we get a lot of questions about what do we intend with it. We don't intend to reclaim the word chinky or homo. We just want to use it because at the point we feel that when it comes to an imagination about Northeastern queer people, the general public, their mind or their imagination or their idea is still stuck with those 2 words. So we just want to use that word to just as a conversation starter. But what we want to do with it, what does the collective wants to do, that's something that we still haven't determined yet. At this point, what we want to do is collect voices, make a database of it, like a print or a digital archive, particularly for the young generation of Northeastern queer from Northeast people, for them, so that they don't feel so isolated as how we felt when we were growing up, and also so that they can feel that they are also people like them. That's our very simple goal at this moment. And we feel that while trying to collate that voices, that itself will bring representation. And so that's what we are aiming. After 2 years, the Chinky Homo Project might take on another name. It might become something else. We don't want to we determine that at this moment. We just want to collect voices at the moment. We are very thankful to Tarshi also, because that was when we first did a public publication of what we want to say. And I will be reading out that article that Tarshi published along with us. It was It came as part of their. Tarshi runs a blog called In Plain Speak, which is a monthly issue, and then every month there is a theme, and the theme for March was home and sexuality. That's when we pitched our article, and they published it for us. We're really thankful to them for that, and that is what I'll be reading. The article is called "Do Queer Migrants from the Northeast Find Indian Cities Alienating or Empowering?" Growing up as an effeminate boys or tomboyish effeminate boys or tomboyish girls in a small town of Northeast India was a traumatic experience for many of us. Those of us who did not fit into the categories of a regular masculine boy or a typical feminine girl were ridiculed and bullied. Homo was a derogatory word that made us uncomfortable in our own skin and ashamed of our body. Though there are words in local dialects that signify queerness, such as Meiki in Assamese and Nupi Manbi or Nupi Sabi, Nupa Manbi or Nupa Sabi among the Meitei speaking community of Manipur, Homo still remains the word that is still widely used across Northeast India as an umbrella term to rather disrespectfully identify people who don't conform to gender norms or have a deviant sexual orientation, that is, transgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. Another word, Chinky, is an unfriendly term that marks Northeasterners as a racial other based on appearance. People from the Northeast are viewed as ethnically inferior and exotic and erotic for their skin and hair color and texture. For the rest of India, the Northeast conjures up an image of tribal cultures and people living in the jungle. Chinky is a word that marks the fetishization of the Northeasterner's body, and through this word, the body becomes the ground of a political struggle of reclaiming and determining the dignity and integrity of Northeastern resistance outside of the region, not in the region but outside of the region. It becomes a symbol of the unification of Northeastern migrants with their homeland, as lack of opportunity, political unrest, and stigma compels Northeastern youth to pursue higher studies and careers in cities outside the region. Chinky is a slur that often incites a sense of pride in one's own skin and stirs up a sense of collective resistance and retaliation. Nevertheless, slurs remains a big hurdle in our journey towards our ambitions, aspirations, and preferred way of life. A person living in the cusp or intersection of both subjectivities, that is, being queer and being from the Northeast, experiences a constant state of anxiety over the quest for self-determination and a sense of belonging. In the last decade, the migration of people from the Northeast to other Indian cities has been rapidly increasing. These cities have become a gateway to financial and professional security and success. Besides every other struggle that any city migrant goes through, racial discrimination also comes as part of the package. Systemic discrimination against Northeastern people can even be called a widespread crisis. Reports of violence against Northeastern people are still quite common. The experience of discrimination in these cities has become a collective narrative that has found its way into newspaper articles, debates on news channels, and in courts, so that now someone can be jailed for uttering the word Chinky. A major question for a Northeast Indian who migrates to an Indian city is, do you feel at home? And it's not a surprise when a majority state that they don't feel at home, citing the difference in language, culture, and food habits, and the prevalence of racial discrimination and violence, among others. On the other hand, urban spaces often denote better prospects for queers and the opportunity for a more fulfilling life, the promise of less harassment and fewer prying questions. As such, many migrants from the Northeast are queers. A bigger city has more options and opportunity for livelihood, a bigger market for any acquired skills, and as mentioned before, a chance to fully express our choice and desire under the garb of anonymity. Another aspect of living in a bigger city is the existence of a visible queer movement and avenues for community building and networking. In short, cities offer a landscape from the feeling of offer an escape from the feeling of alienation from one's own kin and reason. In the case of a Northeastern queer migrating to another Indian city for opportunities and livelihood, the racial othering, cultural subordination, and the eroticization and exoticization of the Northeastern bodies represents a curious case where it is rather tricky to draw a line between alienation and celebration. Often, reclaiming the desirability quotient and the exoticized versions of Northeastern people's bodies that are fetishized as an object of fantasy becomes the most obvious and primary ground for the process of self-assertion and determination, but it doesn't signify a divergence from the narrative of Chinky. In any case, the victimhood remains. By victimhood, we mean a certain loss of power and not being able to represent and influence public opinion of oneself and one's own community. Therein lies the complex case of the Chinky Homo. Your body may be sexualized and glamorized, and in the process, you may become an alluring and covetable object, but this can be problematic as well. Being a Chinky and a Homo inhabiting a major Indian city is both racially alienating and threatening at the very least, and at the very least raises some pertinent questions. And the most intriguing questions at the moment is, does the Chinky Homo feel alienated or empowered in these cities? To begin with, understand that the alienation will continue to remain until and unless the metropolitan cities become truly multicultural and inclusive of diverse races and communities. We are talking about a metropolitan city where momos would be viewed just as a food item and not as a cultural or regional marker accentuated with disrespect. On the subject of cities and inclusivity, Smita Vania rightly states, when you don't exist within the law, how do you claim public space anywhere? There is no law in the Indian Penal Code which protects a queer person from being thrown out of any public space. When you don't have a space at all, how do you make it inclusive? In fact, if the city is not inclusive, how does one create a sense of belonging? If as a Northeastern queer, you're always conscious that the law doesn't protect you and you are racially differentiated and targeted by goons and others alike, how do you then navigate the city? How do you walk through the narrow lanes of Old Delhi or areas around New Delhi or Northeast Delhi or the railway stations in Delhi without feeling anxious and vulnerable? Or say, how would you feel if you were the only Northeasterner and that too a queer late at night in the Parathewala Gully of Delhi while the dhabas carry on with their business crowded with customers? On the other hand, there exist pockets like Munirka, Humayunpur, Vijayanagar, Indra Vihar, Maharani Bagh, Narayana, Kotla, and more, where the market has a fair share of enterprises run by Northeastern people. These pockets are quite safe. Once, a building owner was seen shouting at a cop for regularly harassing one of his Northeastern tenants who runs a coffee shop. These are few of the paradoxes that a city like Delhi can present. The underprivileged are constantly huddled into specific areas, and in such pockets, we are surprised to see a certain glimpse of multiculturalism and inclusivity. Northeastern people in general and Northeastern queer people are visible and are easily able to find themselves a home in such areas. Some have even started their business enterprises in these ethnic enclaves. However, it's tricky to say that Northeastern people and Northeastern queer people in particular are also fully understood and accepted in these neighborhoods. Maybe the tension shifts focus uh, from racial difference, gender and sexual preference to a question of class. But the question is, do these spaces liberate us from racial profiling based on our features? Or how much acceptance can money and class mobility really buy us within the already established social and cultural norms of an area or a region? How accepted are we here, both racially and in terms of gender and sexual preferences? And do acceptance and tolerance necessarily mean liberation from being stereotyped? We feel that the othering never stops. We just become a familiar or accepted other. Sometimes spending power might also pave a way for our differences to be celebrated by the locals who are at the receiving end of our expenses. This might make it easy for us to accept the differences that we have been marked with, But this inclusivity is still a form of racial profiling, even if it originates from empathy. This empathy often comes from a restrictive narrative of Northeastern victimhood. Without the opportunity to assert ourselves independently and through our own language and context, somehow we still remain an easy target of bullies, abuse, and threats. Moreover, the general Northeastern population that inhabits these inclusive pockets also still carries a sense of indifference towards homos. So these ethnic enclaves also reverberate the anxieties of being queer at home when we were back at home to a certain extent. For a Chinky Homo, for a Chinky Homo, where does our next quest for an ultimate belonging, dignity, and integrity lie? For the broader LGBTIQ community, class mobility and participation in the pink economy, which is also yet another form of capitalist appropriation of the market for queers, is often seen as the ticket to inclusivity and acceptance. This creates a very judgmental space for those who are already deprived and have to struggle for their livelihood on a daily basis, or those with limited earnings and options for livelihood. It is important to note that economic prosperity, class privilege, and better access to cities' exclusive spaces for the rich can give a false feeling of safety, power, and belonging. But class cannot be the solution to social inequality and injustice. Class itself is inequality and exploitation embodied. So the narrative of freedom, power, and belonging brought through riches is not a viable option of trying to achieve inclusion in a metropolitan city. Money offers spaces that may seem accepting and tolerant, but in reality, they exclude Northeastern people who have been marginalized on the basis of class and income. On the other hand, the queer movement and its discourse on the intersections of class, caste, gender, sexuality, and race offers a space of belonging for sexually divined Northeasterners. But this sense of belonging is also not complete in itself. It is a fact that queer spaces are only accessible to a few among the many numbers of Northeastern queer people in Delhi. Often these spaces becomes alienating and isolating due to their keen focus on class aspirations and fixation on a meta-narrative of LGBTIQ struggles, in which there is a lack of representation and focus on the lived realities and anxieties of queer people from the Northeast. Despite the existence of various pockets in which a Northeastern queer could possibly reclaim and celebrate their racial identity, our sexual orientation conjures an awkward indifference and discomfort within our own kin. The limited resources that come to the Northeast as an underdeveloped part of the country makes our struggle in cities more challenging as class comes to the forefront along with the sexual politics. The lack of networks for Northeastern queer people to discuss the above issues and the lack of representation and discourse in the queer movement further adds to our woes as we are left with no options but to carry and subsume the burden of our own bodies and the violence it invites. A few protests do erupt once in a while, but Northeastern queer people continue to live with the anxiety of racial profiling and double discrimination on the basis of their sexuality and gender identity. Their search for a home in their own country continues to be an alienating experience in both the regions they belong to and the cities where they live and work. Thank you so much. That was it. And so what I just said right now, I think is particularly set in the context of Delhi again. And as we know, India is again very diverse. So what is predominantly say common in Delhi is not common in South India also. So and Mauri had also asked if we can sort of bring in a few. If Mauli can also, Mauli had asked if we can sort of bring some sort of voices of people who live in Chennai or in Tamil Nadu itself. It's very sad that Aru and Romal couldn't be here today. They were planning to, but Aru just got sick and got hospitalized yesterday, and Romal had some work. I spoke to them, and this is I'm gonna try and summarize what they had to say about Chennai and being queer. Aru is a northeastern queer from Tripura. He came to Chennai 5 years ago for studies, and then he found Chennai so welcoming and so nice and so warm that he would call Chennai as his chosen city. As in, he decides to make Chennai the place where he work and probably live for the rest of his life. He talks so in recounting his experience in Chennai, he talks about how like over here also he enjoys the perks of being outsider, he calls it, but it's very different of how we face it in Delhi and how he has faced it here. For him, it has been a thing for which he was, in fact, like he says he's been out, I mean, he was othered that way as the outsider, but he didn't face any violence because of that, but rather that became a reason for which he got a lot of support from a lot of people, like people taking special care for him because he doesn't know the language and he's here in this foreign land for the first time. Like starting from his college days to where he worked. Talk about Chinky, he says that in his context he doesn't mind being called a Chinky because the way in which this idea of what Chinky means has been projected to him, or how he has faced it, is not from that derogatory or abusive perspective, but all the more about how his friend celebrates his differences from him and in a very joking, casual manner and not in a violent, abusive way. For example, he hasn't faced any instance of just walking down a road and somebody just going by calling you Chinky Winky, whereas that happens a lot in North India. In Delhi, it happens a lot. In Baroda, also, I've faced the same thing a couple of times. Um, and he also talked about how being the different other or the other, the outsider, have given the perks. Talk about being the perks of being an outsider. He realized how he is more celebrated here. Like he used to practice music and love singing back at home as well, but then he said, ki, like it was not something that people would point him out for or people would ask him to pursue further. But when he joined his college here in Chennai and he was prompted to perform and he won the first prize and he really liked it. Furthermore, he has also shared about how certain instances, I asked him like how has the people been to him, and he said people has been really warm. He shared about experiences whereby at one point of a time he was trying to talk to an Uber driver over phone and he wasn't able to communicate, while another Uber cab just stopped by and just get down from the car and helped him talk to another Uber driver. Instances like that. But of course, he does say that in the beginning, the temperature of Chennai, the weather, the food habit, it was a little bit hard for him to bear with it. But considering how warm the city has been to him, he now feels that it's something that he would like to put up an effort to sort of embrace it as well. Then talking about talking about the queer part, he is very happy with Chennai because he found three lovers in Chennai, and he's very happy for that reason. He feels loved. He feels there's a lot many memories. Of course, he says that there has been instances where people just outrightly reject him because he doesn't have quote unquote like bigger eyes or pointed nose or doesn't look like people from here. But then again, he has been able to find three lovers and have amazing relationship and memories. So he's he loves Chennai. I think so. He really loves Chennai. Another person that I spoke with is Romal. I'm sure a lot of you knows Romal Ishram. Romal is half Tamil and half Meitei. He only came to know his half Meitei during his childhood when he started going to school. Something that Romal share about, so basically somebody who belongs to Northeast and like who has connection with Northeast and who has connection with Chennai has some very curious things to share. He feels that one of the reasons why Northeast people would love Chennai is because Chennai is full of art. There is, as according to him, there is art everywhere. And Northeast, if you really look at Northeast, the cultural context of the culture of Northeast and how our life back in Northeast is very much connected with creativity. There's always some sort of like creativity is something that is pretty much there, like art forms, music, poetry, or just in the way we converse with each other, like etiquettes and all that. These are very much there in Manipur, and he feels that Northern people will also find that in Chennai as well. To a certain extent, he has done a little bit of research where he feels that the Meitei language, the Tamil language, and Korean language are somehow connected, or like he wants to trace that also. He thinks there is a connection. He's also a linguist that way, and he wants to trace it further. He also feels that the Tamil Sangam movement and the self-determination movement happening in Northeast are also sort of similar, because it is about trying to critically identify and imagine and also articulate what do you feel as yourself in your own context, when vis-a-vis the diversity that India as a nation sort of projects itself as. Um, and and one of the things that he feels that Chennai stands exceptionally, Chennai from the rest of the Indian cities, is that people here believe in one thing, that if you will give me respect and if you respect my culture, then I'll respect your culture as well. And which is why when I spoke with Aru and Roma, I didn't really get to hear a lot of, say, traumatic experience of being from that region and then coming here and trying to lead a life here, as compared to the article that we shared, because over there's a lot of struggle that we have to go through. And with that, I come to the end of my sharing. Kumam Davidson, who is a very close friend of mine and also the co-founder of Chinky Homo Project, is also a writer. He writes very, and we would like to share some of his writing as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Kumam Davidson. I'm the co-creator of the Chinky Homo Project. I'm also an independent journalist and a social media advocate for gender justice. First of all, I would really like to apologize to the organizers and the audience here for not being able to come personally to the Queer Fest. I also like to thank the organizers for giving me this space in the form of this video to share my thoughts and work. I also like to thank Mauli personally for being really supportive of the last few weeks. As part of the Chinky Homo Project session today, I'm going to read out short extracts from three of my short stories. As part of the Chinky Homo Project session today, I'm going to read out three extracts from my short stories. The first one is titled Imphal Express Bus. It is a short story published in the 2018 spring issue of Yendai, a journal based in Manipur. The story is about two young boys in a residential school far away in the hills of Chultanpur in Manipur. Their friendship blossomed into an intimate relationship, and just when they were beginning to indulge in the newfound intimacy, separation tore them apart. Here it goes. I feel the coldness on my back. I shudder a little. As the chill of the rainy morning seeps into my skin, I automatically move closer to him. My body touches his backside in perfect alignment from head to toe. There's barely any part of my body which doesn't touch his. My left hand lies across his soft and warm belly. I always crave for this part of his body, soft, smooth, and somehow always inviting. I might have gotten used to putting my hand there for some time now, when we sleep together every night. But I seem to be pressing into him slightly tighter today. It makes me conscious also. So I check if he's still asleep, unaware of my stubborn hands on his body. At the same time, I can feel warm sensations stirring inside my body, a stronger urge than usual. This burst of feeling, something like an adrenaline rush, taking the shape of a desire inside my body, seems to thrust me closer to him. I hold him tighter, and my hands automatically start rubbing his soft belly in circles. All the while, I'm also scared that I might wake him up, but the sensations and urge are powerful to the point of overwhelming me. Even as I try very hard to stop myself from doing whatever is about to happen, the sensations take the better of me. My hand slowly touches his nipples, groping his breast and squeezing it a bit and rubbing it softly. Then after a while, I find my hand touring down slowly and slowly, rubbing his skin as it goes down towards the lower abdomen, and I perfectly know where my hand is. I perfectly know my hand is not going to stop just right there. A week later, contrary to Newton's fears, The two boys are ecstatic in each other's company. Pari insists on sleeping together every night, and his casually playful behavior in bed makes Ningthem excited. When they bed together every morning, Ningthem still glances as Pari pours water on his body, the water dripping over his crotch area covered under his grip, exciting inexplicably. The two boys are seen together at dinner table, assemblies, classroom, and in the playground. The bliss soon turns a tricky turn when they fight about something that has made Ningthem very upset. However, Pari won't stop just following him. Riled with this overwhelming attention, Ningthem first tries to avoid him as much as he can, but eventually succumbs to Pari's dedicated persistence. A month passes or does, and one day the school principal makes an announcement in the assembly that ends up making both of them very unhappy. They barely understand all of it, but they do come to know that due to the ceasefire conflict in Manipur, food supply may not be able to reach their school. The principal declares that there could be a temporary break if the food supply stop and the available stocks get over. What do these boys in school know about ceasefire anyway, except for it means a break? Pari is excited about the break because he has many friends back home. Ningthem has already dreamt in reserve all his dreams about spending every night with Pari, and so the thought of a holiday saddens him. Pari pinches Ningthem while passing a wry smile at the mention of the break. Ningthem hates him for the excitement he feels about going home. However, the touch, still a reminder of their physical intimacy, continues to arouse Ningthem. The next story is titled An Army Man in Manipur and a Young Boy Who Runs a Shop. The story is about a 12-year-old young boy visited by an army man posted in Manipur in his shop, and their initial conversations leading to an unspoken relationship that shook the young boy like a storm, putting him into confusions and questions. The story goes, the next time he showed up at the shop, he hurried himself inside. He had a polythene bag filled with small boxes on his left hand. But first, he quickly put down the rifle slung on his shoulder and placed it in one corner of the shop, slightly slanted, and the tip turns upwards. He took off his cap and put it on the shelf, after which he placed the polythene bag on the shelf at my hand's length and took out the boxes. He opened all three, and it turned out to be different varieties of sweets. I didn't know where he got all those sweets from, because in the hotels in my town, run by Hindi-speaking people, especially Biharis, I had not seen such exquisite-looking sweets. He picked a large burfi and fed me with his hands. He didn't let me take just a bite, but put the whole sweet inside my mouth. It was delicious, not too sweet, but soft and extremely delicious. I had never eaten a burfi like that before. It must have been probably bought from the large and nice hotels in Imphal. He fed me a nice, juicy sweet after that. I didn't know what it was called, but he later told me it's known as cham cham. He didn't simply stop with that. He told me to take out chilled Sprite and Coca-Cola from the refrigerator, which I did. Then he thrust $40 in my hand, asked me to choose which one I liked, and I chose Sprite. So we opened our bottles and drank it. He then ate the cham cham as well, after which he finally told me what was the whole thing about. It turned out that a nephew was just born at his home in Uttar Pradesh the previous morning. It's the first child of his brother and sister-in-law, and their whole family was celebrating, and he couldn't help but celebrate in a far-away place called Manipur. After we had another round of burfi and finished the soft drinks, we sat down to chit-chat. He asked about the Hindi songs he gave me, and I asked him about his family. That day we chatted for quite long, until my mother, from the kitchen, called me out for lunch, because of which he had to leave. Before leaving, he mentioned how happy he was to have a nephew, and then suddenly bent down to hug me, and according to what I could figure in the few seconds, he put his lips on my left cheek. For a fraction of a second, I almost jumped. But by then, He had released himself from me and picked up the cap and rifle and stepped out of the shop. He put the cap on his head and slung the rifle on his right shoulder and walked ahead swiftly. After he had gone out of sight, I sat down, rewound the last few seconds in my mind and tried to understand what had happened. I thought of all the sweets he had left, all the CDs he had given me, and the day he first came to this shop and how he patted my back when he left. I didn't fully understand, but as much as I could figure out, I felt that he was fond of me. And I too enjoyed the attention and care. Maybe I was fond of him. And that idea creeped me out. It felt weird and strange. The thought of others, knowing it, embarrassed me so much. At that moment, my mother shouted in bed from the kitchen, so I closed one side of the door and went inside for lunch. The last story is titled Gay Cruising in Imphal. This one is a story about going out cruising in Imphal one late evening and the roundabout that followed. Here it goes. The city acquires a different look at sunset. Unlike metropolitan cities, things come to a standstill once the sun goes down the hills in the west. Few vehicles were plying when I was driving towards Ganga Gate. For someone used to metropolitan life, Imphal in the evening doesn't fail to give me a sense of being abandoned and deserted. I parked my Activa scooter near the park gate. As I took the turn and headed towards the footpath, I saw a big car parked a little ahead. On the other side of the road, two men, each sitting on their bikes, were watching me since the moment I took the turn. I immediately put a different gear about myself. My hips swayed more than it would in any other place. I returned glances to which they said something to each other and got back to watching me, this time more intently. I walked further ahead, passing by a mid-30s man who then probably groomed his hair, kept haircuts at the new salons in Kesampa, or buy clothes at Gambhir Shopping Center and wear matching shoes, but he surely looked confident. In the dim light, I saw his hand stroking his groin while he gave a casual yet careful look on his face. When I passed by his side, he quickly scanned me head to toe and then toe to head. It was quick and we almost stared at each other for a second or two. His hands were still on his groin, but I walked ahead to see the man in the car. I slowed down my pace in the light from his cell phone, which he pretended to be using, because I saw his head slightly fixed towards me, and what I saw was a fair-skinned man. His head was slightly bald in the front, but the rest of his hair appeared properly trimmed. His collared shirt was folded till his elbow, showing a big golden watch on his left wrist. I imagined that he was returning from office and decided to come here. He must have texted his wife that he would be seeing a friend and come home late. He probably earned enough to look after his wife and send his children to the best school in the state, and also keep his own parents happy enough, except there were secrets that he carefully guarded, lest his life would be ruined. So he met strangers near Beatty Park and made sure he didn't divulge any detail, not even actual name or address. That must be worrisome, I thought, living a dual life. Thank you. Thank you everyone for listening to me, and I wish you all a fabulous LitFest in Chennai. Thank you.